Germany is in deep trouble. While it might have the strongest economy in Europe, life really isn't easy for its 80 million people, and they're responding by leaving in their droves.
I'm leaving Germany. In fact, I have already left, and I'm not coming back, ever.
I've been gone for a minute. It's been almost about a month now, and there's huge reasonings for this. Basically, I am leaving Germany.
I'm actually leaving Germany. It's not because I hate my country, it's because I just don't see any future here anymore. Germany is collapsing under its own weight.
Not refugees, not the poor, but its own. Engineers, doctors, software developers, skilled tradespeople. The people any country would kill to keep are packing up and leaving. But when you realize how bad the situation really is, you can't blame them. Not only does the average German worker hand over nearly half of their income in taxes and social contributions, but they also get in return crumbling roads, trains that don't run on time, an internet connection slower than Romania's, and an energy bill that makes their eyes water. They're pretty much paying 5-star prices for a terrible 2-star service.
We pay for a Mercedes, but we drive a Golf. We are really in a relatively bad situation, which I haven't seen for many decades.
Meanwhile, the economy that's supposed to justify all of this is stalling. Germany's GDP per capita hasn't meaningfully grown in years. The industrial giants that made Germany the engineering powerhouse of Europe are cutting thousands of jobs or moving production abroad, because it's simply too expensive to make things in Germany anymore. And it's not just the money. Germany is, by a lot of people's accounts, a miserable place to live.
Among 53 countries, Germany ranks 5th from the bottom when it comes to making friends. My tip? Lower your expectations when it comes to making friends fast in Germany.
That's not just some expat whining on Reddit, though there is plenty of that. That's an official ranking, 5th from the bottom out of 53 countries in making friends. Below Saudi Arabia, below India, below Kuwait. So if you think it's hard to make friends where you live, be thankful you're not in Germany. Germans themselves will tell you this. There's a particular kind of coldness to daily interactions here that goes beyond cultural difference. Try making small talk on the U-Bahn and people will physically move away from you. Smile at a stranger in Berlin and they'll assume you're either drunk or insane, especially if you don't look cool enough to even belong there. Sure, that's practically a North European tradition, but that doesn't mean it doesn't suck for a country desperate to attract younger people.
They just stare and you don't know how to react to it because you smile at them and they don't smile back at you. So you're just there like on your phone like, okay.
They'll get mad at you for a lot of very little things. You take too long to get off the train, they'll give you the filthiest look, say something in German, almost push you off. If you smile at somebody, they'll look at you like a weirdo.
Sure, a lot of the big cities are like this. People have been saying this about London for years, but the stereotype doesn't hold everywhere as well as it does in Germany.
I don't find it very welcoming when you object or refuse to give service in another language. It's not only a language barrier, but it's like an imposition, like they impose this to you.
While that guy might not have been to Paris lately, if you think it gets easier once you learn the language, speak to anyone who's actually done it.
Up to this day, I don't feel like I actually belong in society in Berlin. I can move around, I can speak, I can do anything, but it's always this feeling that I am an outsider.
In the end, you might as well speak English and everyone will just put up with you. The work culture doesn't help all of this either. Germany has the second highest tax burden in the entire developed world. 49% of what you earn is gone before you see it, and then they charge you 19% on whatever you spend with what's left.
If you put it in perspective, 7 out of 10 hours you are working for the state, which, in my opinion, is too much.
And for what? Probably so you can go home to a flat you'll never own? Germany has the lowest home ownership rates in the European Union on recent data, and more than half the population are renters. If you want to buy something for a family in Berlin, and Berlin is far from the most expensive city in Germany, you're looking at €1 million. Everybody under 35 has basically given up on ever owning real estate. Instead, people just spend money on Kit Kat or Berghain because there's no point saving for something you can never afford. And it's not only the employed. Germany has been saying for years that they need to make things more attractive for startups and small businesses. And then every year, they do the exact opposite. If you're self-employed, you have to pay even more than employees, double the rate for health insurance. Now they want to make pension insurance obligatory for self-employed people too. Another 18.5% into a system that barely grows and that inflation will have eaten by the time you retire. So the freelancers and the entrepreneurs leave. going basically anywhere but Germany to do business.
And from all the people I know, and I know a lot of freelancers and people who have like small businesses, none of them want to stay in Germany.
Meanwhile, Germany does have one of the best social welfare systems in the world. So good, in fact, that it's almost not worth working a low-income job. If you work full-time on minimum wage, you barely make more than you'd get from the state for doing nothing. You currently get 563 euros cash, your flat's paid for, health insurance is covered, and public transport is included.
In Berlin, it's kind of the opposite. If you have a job, you're like, you're stupid, you're working, why would you do that?
So the people who work hard pay 7 out of 10 hours to the state, and the state then uses that money to make sure it's barely worth working at all. In a system where laziness is rewarded and hard work is penalized. So you can imagine that trying to raise kids in Berlin and other German cities has become exceptionally difficult. Childcare places are so scarce that hundreds of thousands of families are on waiting lists. The housing that's already unaffordable for a couple becomes a fantasy for a family. It's a huge problem because for years, Germany has had an aging population, which is the same problem hitting lots of Western countries right now. But even now, decades after they knew it was a problem, German politicians are only just beginning to confront it. It's intensely unpopular among certain people. Just listen to the reaction of this speech from Germany's current chancellor on pension reform.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is not me and the government simply being mean. Ladies and gentlemen, this is demographics and math.
Und Mathematik.
It is simply too much to expect the contributions of 2 working people to pay for the pension of 1 person in the future.
Poverty and old age across Germany is now amongst the worst in Western Europe, which is really leaving a sour taste given all of the pressure to save into pensions to begin with.
I am very careful what I buy when I'm food shopping, and I generally eat very little. You forget how to eat when you no longer have the money.
That's a 67-year-old retired nursery teacher. Her pension is 800 euros, which barely covers rent, and to eat she works as a private child carer.
I didn't fall into it because I didn't work hard enough. I fell into it because of a situation that wasn't my fault. Working, surviving, fighting. I don't know anything else.
And the gap between the poorer old people, mostly concentrated in the East, and the wealthy, mostly in the West, is widening.
What I hope for from politics is justice, even-handed justice. I want to hear, people, you've worked hard, you've created the foundations for us, now you can rest. I don't see that. On the contrary, the gap between rich and poor is actually getting wider and wider.
The healthcare system tells the same story. Germany spends more on health than any other EU country, 12% of GDP. The average wait for a specialist is 42 days. At this stage, many Germans are saying that their ideology of free healthcare for all is just a myth. 70,000 people in Germany are officially uninsured. The real number could be closer to 1 million. In Hamburg, there's a free clinic where an 80-year-old retired doctor volunteers to treat people who've fallen through the cracks in the richest country in Europe.
I find it unacceptable that in a wealthy country like ours, people are simply left behind, and when they fall ill, they have no protection.
Given all of these social issues firing from all angles, the politicians needed more people paying into their system. So their answer was immigration. At first it made sense, skilled Europeans filling the gaps in the economy. But that source dried up. Merkel, the chancellor at the time, said in a 2015 speech that Germany would handle the migrants. "We can do it," she repeatedly said, while opening the door to millions of new immigrants. That same year, net migration into Germany peaked at over 1 million new arrivals. In hindsight, this might have been one of the most catastrophic decisions made in decades for Europe. But on paper, this looked great just for the German economy. For years, Germany had held itself to a policy of low debt growth. They wrote it into the constitution that new borrowing could not exceed 0.35% of GDP each year. So to boost your numbers, your only option is to increase the overall size of the German economy with lots of new people. Germany's overall GDP did rise because of this, but the amount of GDP per capita remains stagnant. It creates growth on paper with no actual change in reality for anyone. However, on the streets, the changes were felt by everyone. Suddenly, German society was completely divided. There were hundreds of thousands of people openly hostile to Germans just on the streets. There was hardly any integration. and it felt like nobody had a plan with this, but now suddenly Germans just had to live with it. People from very different cultures arrived in huge numbers, then stuck together and recreated their home countries inside Germany rather than integrating. So now Germany had a huge population of people that didn't want to integrate into the country, didn't care about the country, and regular Germans just had to accept this. So it's no surprise that 16% of the population who aren't citizens now commit 34% of the crimes, and in a lot of cases it's hardly even reported. In just a few years, a report found that Germany before was on average the most pro-immigration out of all of Western European nations. Now it's the complete opposite. The current Chancellor now openly makes anti-immigration statements in public despite the fact that it was his party who brought them there in the first place.
Wir haben eine explodierende Gewalt in unserer Gesellschaft, und zwar im analogen wie im digitalen Raum. Und dagegen müssen wir gemeinsam etwas tun. Und dann müssen wir auch ansprechen, dass ein beachtlicher Teil dieser Gewalt aus den Gruppen der Zuwanderer in die Bundesrepublik Deutschland.
And not only brought it to Germany, but brought it to the whole of Europe. Okay, but you're probably wondering, how did it get this bad in Germany? Well, the answer starts with the wall. When Germany reunified in 1990, it wasn't just a political event, it was the merging of two countries that had spent 45 years becoming completely different places. West Germany was the economic miracle. East Germany was a Soviet command economy where the state ran everything badly and then just collapsed overnight. Over 2 trillion euros has been transferred from west to east since 1990. The most expensive reconstruction project in modern European history, and it didn't even work. Drive from Munich to Dresden today and you can still feel the border. The East has lower wages, higher unemployment, worse infrastructure, and a huge deep resentment that 3 decades of money transfers never fixed. The West then pays and watches its own services decay. The East then takes and watches nothing meaningfully change. And the bureaucracy built to manage reunification never went away but metastasized into a different beast. You have local government at the city level, then state level administration, then the federal government, and then EU laws on top of that. Lots of it is riddled with corruption and red tape, with a class of unfireable bureaucrats mixed in as well. Each new crisis adds more into the mix. Trying to get anything done is excruciating. It's like trying to steer a car when 20 other people also have their hands on the wheel, all pulling in different directions, and no one put any fuel in the tank.
German bureaucracy is a lot of paperwork, and if you miss out on something, let's say like if you get late to your appointment even for 5 minutes, you will miss that appointment. It's quite, annoying to get the things done. You need to wait for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and you just have to wait. You cannot do anything.
But nowhere has this been more evident in the country's biggest ever infrastructure project. What should have been the crown jewel of German progress became a caricature of how everything went wrong. After the wall fell, Berlin had 3 small airports, 2 for the west, 1 for the east. Immediately, there were plans to build a new one, but the first sign of the troubles to come was that it took 6 years just to decide where to build it, when they came to the genius conclusion to maybe just build it on top of the old ones. 2 groups of companies won the contracts, but it went off the rails almost immediately. The original companies were paid 50 million euros despite nothing being built. Then houses need demolishing, EU rules needed to be followed, and infinite permits needed to be filed. In 2006, over 15 years since planning began, construction finally started. Politicians set an opening for 2011, pouring money into a viewing platform and other politically marketable extras.
With projects like this, the completion date is absolutely sacrosanct. It's normally chosen for political reasons and everyone is forced to accept the targets. People often aren't honest enough with themselves to say, no, we can't do that.
During the final checks, one of the committees found that the fire alarm system was almost completely non-functional, the escalators weren't working, and the ticket system was busted. Lots of the windows in the terminals wouldn't open if it was hotter than 30 degrees. A new 2014 deadline was then announced, but it was met with widespread skepticism. Then came evidence of corruption, contractors stealing supplies, bureaucrats taking bribes. The deadline slid to 2014, then 2016, then 2018. One German satire newspaper ran a story about how an ISIS agent assigned to attack the airport had died of old age waiting for it to be built. The first flight then left Brandenburg Airport in 2020, 70 billion euros and 30 years later. And that's the flagship. Now imagine everything they don't care about. German bureaucracy and corruption proved a toxic mixture. Bureaucracy, after all, is meant to protect against corruption rather than reinforce it. Proving it's far from being a stereotype, you can find a bureaucracy museum in Berlin. Among the exhibits is a 10-foot stack of paper, the paperwork for a single wind turbine permit. 58% of companies said bureaucracy was the biggest reason they wouldn't invest in Germany. Not taxes, not energy, but paperwork. But while the bureaucracy stopped Germany from building anything new, couldn't stop the politicians from tearing everything down. In 2011, a tsunami caused a nuclear catastrophe in Japan. There were widespread, yet mostly unfounded fears of similar events occurring in Europe. A minority of Germans then took to the streets demanding a nuclear phase-out, and Merkel, with her wise decision-making, thought this would be an easy political win. So she listened. Clean, safe, nuclear energy plants were then shut down and jobs were lost. Renewables now make up a larger share of Germany's energy. But what have they actually replaced? While coal use is down and natural gas is slightly down, a much larger portion of the change came straight from nuclear. They didn't replace dirty energy with clean energy. They replaced clean energy with another form of clean energy and called it progress. Meanwhile, energy in Germany became the most expensive in Europe, which hits its vulnerable citizens the hardest. To support the aging population, the population collapse, the endless mass immigration, the energy crisis, the expanding bureaucracy, and the massive welfare state, Germany has turned towards its own people and hiked their taxes while giving them less in return. Lots of them, like the creators we've been hearing from, have decided to leave. People without the means to do that have found another option, an alternative for Germany.
Right-wing populism is surging in the Western world.
Die deutschen Grenzen sind dicht.
And the Alternative for Germany party is riding the wave. For the first time since the 1930s, the hard right is poised for a national election breakthrough here, and the country is bitterly divided.
It's Berlin briefing time. Germany's governing parties just faced a moment of truth on what their voters think of them, raising the question whether the far-right Alternative for Germany is now becoming the new Workers' Party. And the governing Conservatives and the Social Democrats are gearing up to tell voters what reform efforts they want from them.
Well, polls in Germany are showing a striking shift. The far-right Alternative for Deutschland has now emerged as the country's most popular party. Two new surveys suggest the party is on the verge of a historic breakthrough.
For decades, two parties have run this country, the CDU and the SPD. They decided the future of Germany, and this is what they delivered. Most of their voters are over 60. They voted for those parties their entire lives, and they're not going to change. And because Germany is such an aging country, the over 60s are the biggest voter bloc.
There's this other party, AfD, and they are the second biggest party right now. But no other party will talk to them, vote with them, or discuss anything with them. They are just pretending they don't exist.
The AfD has been rising in the polls. Just like Reform in the UK, they offer a chance at real change, to finally fix these mounting issues. But whether this will even be the case remains to be seen.
Security and planning for the future, security in the here and now. But we are living in a time of no security, because no one knows what the future holds.
But clearly they pose some threat of change, because every other German party has refused to work with them. Because of things like their hardline stances against immigration, they've built what's called the Firewall, an unwritten agreement to freeze the AfD out of politics entirely. They're even trying to ban them now, which doesn't sound the most democratic for a country that calls itself the most democratic in Europe. If 20% of the population votes for a party and that party can't be represented because the others won't acknowledge their existence, that's not a democracy functioning. It doesn't matter what you think about their views, there needs to be some discourse, and in Germany, there is none. Which is why the more they repress them, the more the AfD rise in the polls. And the next big election could actually see them become the largest party, maybe even forming a majority government. In the eastern states, the ones that never really recovered from reunification, they're already dominant.
In a society where there are more men, for example, or elderly people, where there are fewer job opportunities, where the infrastructure is broken, where there are no more buses, where there is no medical care, you'll always find that extremists can get an easier foothold.
We lived through communism when we were always told what to do.
And that's what's happening now too. And this is where Germany's centrist politicians might finally realize that all of these terrible decisions, like importing millions of random immigrants, shutting down nuclear energy, and also robbing the public of all of their money, might have consequences. Everything they've done to stay in control and delay reform has led to a reckoning, and Germany's CDU may just break the firewall to stay in power. This will change the face of Germany and potentially of Europe. You could even argue the UK did Brexit just to get away from the disastrous decisions made by Merkel. Germany is quite clearly the centre of Europe, both politically and geographically. And so if the AfD come into power, they will change Europe's geopolitical stance entirely. The relationship with the US is already under stress. Washington is demanding a much larger military contribution, something Germany might not be able to afford. Meanwhile, lots of AfD politicians have actual ties to the Kremlin. Germany could use cheap Russian gas and energy. It seems inconceivable now in the middle of a war, but pragmatically, Germany and Russia could end up striking a deal. So possibly, just as Bismarck envisioned over a century ago, Germany and Russia could split Europe in two. Russia gains hegemony over eastern Ukraine and Belarus. Germany loses its only real natural enemy. Berlin ignores Washington's demands for military spending and focuses on its own economy propped up by cheap Russian energy. With an agreement, it could continue to dominate Western and Central Europe. And Putin actually wants this. In the book The Foundations of Geopolitics, Kremlin insider Alexander Dugin lays out exactly this vision. Now, of course, this is speculation. Lots of people would see it as a betrayal of Germany's European allies. But with how unhinged geopolitics has gotten recently, it could easily be an option. A future built on the inaction and greed of Germany's ruling political class. The bottom line is that Germany drastically needs reform quickly. If not, their future of stagnation and decay will bring about a terrible crisis. One that could easily end in some of the worst forms of political extremism and destabilize Europe entirely.